heydays of bank fraud cases are probably behind us. However, bank fraud is still being prosecuted by the government on a daily basis. And it usually takes several forms. One of the most basic forms is lying to the bank. Lying in order to boost your creditworthiness, supplying them with false net worth statements. Sometimes as simple as opening up an account under a false name, providing a false social security number. These cases are prosecuted very vigorously. Bank fraud can also involve major loan scams. Real estate developers getting loans for millions of dollars and drawing down on those loans when they're supposedly doing work that's creating value, but in truth and fact the money is being siphoned off to the developers. The government takes these cases very seriously because the deposits are insured by the federal government. And it's a crime that carries up to 30 years imprisonment. And it's basically defined very broadly. Anyone that devises or attempts to devise any type of scheme to defraud a bank is guilty of bank fraud and can be punishable by up to 30 years. What is mortgage fraud? Really, just in a short sentence, is people lying or making misrepresentations to obtain funding for either homes, commercial properties, or any other type of property far in excess of what they would otherwise be able to obtain. And there are all sorts of ways that they do it, but one of the primary ways is that they find certain straw borrowers who they will pretend are buying the properties, and they will pay these people small amounts of money to pretend being the purchaser. And that's one of the common techniques that's used. And they will also need to have a appraiser that is in on the take and is going to jimmy up the appraisals to have a much higher appraised value, so they're able to obtain funds from the lender that far exceed the value of the property. Now, they really have no intent whatsoever to make any payments on these loans other than perhaps the first month or two, just for appearance sake. And they make false statements representing that the homes are going to be owner occupied when they're not going to be owner occupied. And basically what they're doing is they're getting money from the lender, letting the properties go into foreclosure and walking. And ultimately the lender gets saddled with all of these properties, and at the end of the day the government and then the taxpayer gets saddled. These cases can be highly complex because it usually involves fraud among people working at the title company, appraisers, borrowers, the straw borrowers, with everybody pointing the finger at everybody else as to who was engaged in the fraud. What the government typically does is they indict the whole kit and caboodle in a conspiracy and claim that everybody aided and abetted in the fraud, and basically rely upon the defendants to battle it out and point to how the other parties were guilty and not them. If you have been contacted about your possible involvement in a bank fraud scheme, you should not talk with an agent or anybody else. You should tell them that you would like to speak with an attorney, and then make sure that you hire an attorney that is skilled in defending bank fraud cases.